Hello! Welcome back to the second episode of our Baketorio playthrough. Today we're diving into a lot of new recipes and building even bigger factories with some new challenges. We kicked things off by addressing our power issues. Turns out I had completely forgotten to build an offshore pump. After setting that up and tapping into yet another coal field, our power supply finally stabilized. While fending off the ever-persistent biters in the surrounding area, I noticed our weapons were lacking the punch needed to keep them at bay. It was clear, we needed to start our military science production. The key ingredient? Salted hardtack. Fortunately, it's a straightforward recipe. Instead of processing the flour into dough, we simply put it in the furnace and sprinkle a little salt over it. To make this happen, I set up a few mines in a nearby salt field. Built some greenhouses, processed the wheat into flour, laid down furnaces and established the salted hardtack assemblers. Everything was running smoothly until I made a small mistake. I upgraded to space age. In hindsight, it was pretty weird to think that this mod would work perfectly with it. So let me warn you, if you want to play this mod and somehow also have no functioning brain cells, don't use space age. Thankfully later I was able to switch back. During the SIG-up, some of our pumps broke down. After repairing them, I noticed that certain technologies needed re-researching, and our nutrients recipes had mysteriously vanished. After reselecting them, operations resumed without a hitch, at least until we ventured further into the tech tree. Then I finally built the military science assemblers and connected everything. However, a recurring issue arose. Each new greenhouse required its own seed overflow storage, which I have to keep an eye on. Not sure how this happened, but somehow my energy was low because this offshore pump was broken again. I think this place is haunted. I then looked into what I'd need for the next science pack. It turned out to be quite a lot of things, like milk, animal products and many nutrients. Oh boy. To streamline production, I decided it was train time. I built a central train hub, making unloading easier and minimizing the ever-annoying seed overflow problem. Now instead of dealing with 20 different greenhouses spewing seeds everywhere, they can all be handled in one centralized place. On the right side of the hub, I wanna focus on producing raw materials like crops and nutrients, while the left side was dedicated to science pack production. I also hooked up my old milk and cream production to the trains, because it produces so much more than I would ever need for the green science. With military science finished, I also made red ammunition. And while building it, I found some illegally stacked yellow bullets, since Space Age changed the stack size, but sadly I could not use them. I then built a large, centralized wheat field, and again, couldn't be more thankful for my nanobots. No flour can be sent everywhere it's needed. I also experimented with speakers that allowed me when storage overflows. But sadly the recycler is a space age only machine, so I will have to find another solution later. I copied the setup for sugarcane production as well. However, sugarcane needs nutrients, so I added a small station to supply them. But here I realized my mistake to upgrade to space age. In this DLC the rocket comes much earlier, but the nutrients that are needed for the rocket parts are balanced for the base game. I think it could be possible, but it wouldn't be the right way. Besides that, the new planets all of course have no changes in this mod, so this seems not needed. I had to roll it back, but thankfully everything still worked fine afterwards, even the offshore pump. After this ordeal I looked at the tech tree and thought that the modded jetpacks would be awesome for more speed, plus I can stop crashing the car into rocks all the time. To get the jetpacks, I need modular armor, which means red circuits. Let me tell you that it is really weird every time when I have to build quote-unquote normal things because I am so used to only building baking stuff. And don't be confused, I somehow thought that the plastic was iron since both are kinda white. I don't know, I fixed the problem later. But until I have jetpacks researched, those chips just kinda sit in a chest. One good thing about not playing Space Age is that cliff explosions are already available, which makes things a lot easier for me, so that too gets built. One last important thing that isn't baking is landfill. I just took a random unused stone patch and will turn everything into it. Don't forget that I have to check every once a while whether the seeds have overflowed or not. But after this quote-unquote distraction, I expanded the rail network to make place for dedicated nutrients on the right side of my factory. For tier 1 nutrients I went with cheese, since it only requires milk and cream, which once again I had way too much of, and some flour, or rather hardtack. But I always thought that trains always take different stations, and I was kinda confused why it never stopped by the nutrients until I realized that they don't do that. I tried filling with priority and virus, but decided for the easy solution. Just build another train. I wasn't quite sure if a station for flour would be needed, because it doesn't need that much, but we will see. But more or less that's it already. The flour is baked in the hardtack in the oven, and together with cheese in an assembler processed in the nutrients tier 1. By the way, I was unhappy with the horrendous looking train loading, so I built a functioning balancer. On my search for a good tier 2 nutrients recipe, I found one that replaces the hardtack in the tier 1 nutrients with bread. So instead of baking flour straight in the hardtack, I now made dough first, which just requires water, which is essentially free. Since the new recipe was so similar, I copied most of my setup, except for wheat and flour production. In hindsight, I could have made one flour station for both nutrients, but well, it's already built and I will just fix it when the seeds do in fact overflow. It was almost time to start blue signs. And let's be real, this was the moment we'd be waiting for so long. At least I did. For the blue signs I need frosted donuts, cheesecake and brownies. And for the latter also tier 3 nutrients. Just like the sugarcane needs tier 2. Besides that I also needed eggs, something I already made for green signs. I first just copied it and then changed it to look more like a block. Helpful if I want to copy it again later. Hello! Now I have everything to start blue signs, but my iron ran out. That's something I didn't have on my radar, but I guess those hundreds of greenhouses and thousands of belts cost a lot of iron. But a quick station later and everything is fine. First I wanted to make the cocoa seeds, but for that I needed to find a recipe I can make. Thankfully there was one with frosted donuts and cakes, things I already made for green signs, right next door. Found a nice place for greenhouses right beside my milk production and copied the sugarcane production block right over. Horrible plan, because I would need over 500 assemblers to process all of that cocoa into powder, because the production speed is so much slower. In an attempt to fix it, I cut the greenhouses in half and spammed assemblers until the space ran out. It still wasn't a good ratio, but good enough to let it be for now. Once the cocoa nightmare was somewhat under control, I moved on to building the science production stations. Sadly I forgot to record the first part, but I just made baking flour and cheese, both things you already saw. I made those for the tier 3 nutrients that needed the cheese and frosted cake you see me make in the background. Nothing new. At this point I wasn't totally sure if tier 3 nutrients were in the right place. But since cocoa production was nearby, it made sense to keep things compact for now, and I also was lazy. And for the last thing I needed, one bonus, there was a salt patch nearby. So I could just run it straight into the main belt-like thingy. Now with all the prep finally done, it was time to actually make blue science ingredients. Starting with frosted donuts. Step 1. Frosted donuts. Frosted donuts had a pretty simple process. Make fryer dough, shape it, bake it and frost it. With some small spaghetti I hooked up the milk, butter, salt, and dough. Shaping is an interesting step because it doesn't need anything. You just put the dough in and it is shaped how you need it. Baking is easy enough, and the frosting is something I made like 5 times already. Having the first input finished, it was time to build the assemblers for the signs. I had some problems with the design, but I was quite satisfied with what I had in the end. With that done, I moved on to cheesecake. Interestingly, these are actually made of cheese and are not at all sweet, just how I usually know them. I looked it up and apparently there really is something like that in Switzerland. I don't know if the developer comes from there, just thought it was funny, or if they're available elsewhere, but I found it quite interesting. But besides that, there actually isn't that much more to say. The cheese gets mixed with the basic cake batter. That gets shaped. And then cooked. No frosting here. Lastly, there were brownies that were so easy, I thought of something. But no, one assembler to make the powder with some basic cake batter into chocolate batter, and one furnace to bake that into brownies. That's it. Everything was working perfectly. Fixing one small belting mistake, and the blue science is running fine. But the sheer power draw of all that wrecked my energy grid. I was already pushing my luck with power, but this started crashing harder than due after a short 20-hour session of Factorio. I guess the first thing I will research is nuclear power. TED packs can wait. One last thing I found while googling was a nutrient recipe finder, which honestly would have been super useful earlier, but I was kinda blind. It lets me pick 2 baked items of choice, and it automatically selects the right nutrient recipe if available. Good to know for the next time. But that was it for today. This episode took a week longer than expected because I just started a new job, but I hope the wait wasn't too bad. Looking ahead, we'll be tagging 2 more science packs, and if all goes well, which it probably won't, we're about 2 videos away from finishing. Then I'll be doing a big supercut of the whole playthrough, which I've been planning since the start, but it just was too much work. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Until then, happy baking!